Okay, you must be wondering why I'm here. I'm Chaplain Joseph, as usual, and I am one of the persons working at Los Angeles Medical Center, and they are working me too hard. But I am glad to be here. Glad to be here to welcome you, especially since our minister, Reverend Janet McKeithen, has had a minor surgical procedure and she is still recovering. But we are glad to see her on our Zoom.
Hey, Janet.
Welcome to all those on Zoom. Welcome. So as we have heard, it's a multicultural, multi-religious, multi-faith community, and we are happy to be here today to continue our worship series. Last night actually, we had a very good program. Our poems and music really inspiring. We had about 8 persons doing poetry, and a couple playing music, and that was a very inspiring program indeed. So we thank Brother Nate as well for continuing to inspire us with his ministry. And as we know, no one person speaks for the church in Ocean Park. We all speak and we all share and come to good consensus. I was hoping that the higher-ups would follow our example. But we'll continue to pray for our people and our government. So welcome again. And we are going to have the land acknowledgement at this time. We, the people of the church in Ocean Park, recognize that our building in Santa Monica, California, sits on stolen land. We, the settlers of this land, honor the Quiche, the Tongva, and Chumash peoples. We acknowledge the harms of genocide, forced humiliation, gender violence, destruction of sacred rights, the burial of historic truths, and the indigenous suffering at the hands of U.S. settler colonialism. We also acknowledge that our community and country was built on the backs of people stolen from Africa, placed into bondage, and forced into labor. We acknowledge that we benefit from that labor that has never been repaid. In acknowledgement, let us therefore commit ourselves to healing by helping to create a more just and equitable world through the struggle of changing how we do things that we once saw as normal. We apologize for the harm by pledging ourselves to be part of this culture of repair. Let us now join in Thich Nhat Hanh's chant, I have arrived, I am home, in the here and in the now. We sing it 3 times. I have arrived, I am home, in the welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chaplain Joseph. And now we have two readings. We already heard one, but my mind was distracted, and I want to hear it again. So Jean and then Chris. Thank you. Chris and then Jean. Okay.
This is from Joanna Macy, who's a systems thinker, a writer, activist, teacher, and Buddhist. We are capable of suffering with our world, and that is the true meaning of compassion. We are capable of suffering with our world. This is the true meaning of compassion. The suffering enables us to recognize our profound interconnectedness with all beings. Don't ever apologize for crying for the trees burning in the Amazon or over the waters polluted from mines in the Rockies. Don't apologize for the sorrow, grief, and rage you feel. It is a measure of your humanity and your maturity. It is a measure of your open heart. And as your heart breaks open, there will be room for the world to heal. That is what is happening as we see people honestly confronting the sorrows of our time. The biggest gift you can give is to be absolutely present. And when you're worrying about whether you're hopeful or hopeless, or pessimistic or optimistic, who cares? The main thing is that you're showing up, that you're here, and that you're finding ever more capacity to love this world, because it will not be healed without that. That was what is going to unleash our intelligence and our ingenuity and our solidarity for the healing of our world. You don't need to do everything. Do what calls your heart. Effective action comes from love. It is unstoppable, and it is enough.
That was so lovely. Well, I've heard that when we look at paintings or listen to poetry or listen to music, that every time you see or hear, you hear or see something different. So let's see if you hear something different this time. By Rosemary Watola Traumer. What if instead of grief, we call it pollination? A process through which we realize the gold of our hearts spills out. And if we are to survive as a species, it requires we somehow exchange this gold with each other. All our hearts splayed open, all our hearts needing what the other hearts have. It's messy, vulnerable, and this is how we go on. Your grief, my grief, the quiet buzz of conversation, this splitting open, this spilling, this sharing with each other.
Maureen chose these readings. We have a special speaker today. Been too long, Maureen Shannon-Chapple. She's a longtime member of this church, and I'll just tell you a little bit more about her. She's been a practitioner of yoga and meditation since her teenage years. Her professional life has included classroom teaching, parenting trainings, adult education, and college teaching. She is a 2008 graduate of Spirit Rock Meditation Center's Community Dharma Leader Training and has led groups include Insight LA's family program, mindfulness classes, and the weekly Tuesday night sitting group at Loyola Marymount University. Maureen co-leads with Trudy Goodman Insight LA's facilitator training program. She also teaches in the Mindful USC program and other community sites. She is currently one of the teams of teachers anchoring the monthly Mindful of Whiteness, Anti-Racism Practices for White People group at Insight LA. So I'm going to do a song first, and then Maureen will speak. This song was popularized by Judy Collins, but actually Joni Mitchell wrote it. So you probably know this, both sides now. Rows and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air and feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun and rain and snow on everyone. So many things I could have done, but clouds got in my way. I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's clouds, illusions I recall. I really don't know clouds at all. Moons and Junes and Ferris wheels, the dizzy dancing way you feel when every fairy tale comes real. I've looked at love that way, but now it's just another show. You leave home laughing when you go, and if you care, don't let them know. Don't give yourself away. I've looked at love from both sides now, from give and take, and still somehow it's love's illusions I recall. I really don't know love at all. Dreams and schemes and circus crowds to say I love you right out loud, and dreams and snow, da-da-dum, uh-oh. I've looked at life that way, but now old friends are acting strange. They shake their heads, they say I've changed. Well, something's lost and something's gained in living every day. I've looked at life from both sides now, from win and lose, and still somehow it's life's illusions I recall. I really don't know life at all. Thank you. And now, welcome to Maureen Chapple.
Thank you, Louise. Can you all hear? Yeah? I don't know my eyes anymore. Like, when am I going to need the glasses and when am I not? But it looks like not. I want to just thank you all for being here. Some of you I hopefully will meet today for the first time. And some of you I've known for decades, and it's just lovely to be in the room with you all. And thank you, Janet, for the opportunity and the trust in asking me to speak today. I think our last week's speaker got the Joni train rolling, yes. And I had already asked Louise to prepare that song, so thank you, Louise. Maybe like some of us of a certain age, Joni was the soundtrack of our adolescence. Couldn't have gotten through it without her. And, she wrote that song when she was 21 years old. And people sometimes say, what could you know of sorrow, And I didn't know it, actually, when I was singing with her, but she had been a survivor of childhood polio. She had an entire year in which she couldn't walk and was in a hospital and was told by the doctors she'd never walk again. And she was like, she just worked a little every day until she did. And she also, by this time, had a child out of public view. And this is, at a time when it was quite not okay to be a single mom, and she had no resources. I just, in preparing for this talk, found out she had the child with her daughter, for 8 months. So you can't even imagine the excruciating decision to relinquish her for adoption. And we've had some of this in my own family. So she knew her way around sorrow at 21, as unfortunately some even very young children do already. Both sides now. In my teen years, I was also really enchanted with the work of William Blake, his art and his poetry, the songs of innocence and experience, and just really looking at the joy and sorrow of life. And maybe like you, as a young adolescent with a safe enough childhood, that I was imagining that growing up meant that I would find some frame for love and life that protected me against sorrow. And that there was something wrong if something made me feel unhappy, or as a white person, even uncomfortable, right? And that if that was the case, it needed to be fixed. And I wanted a lasting and loving relationship, and hit the lottery on that one, I will say. The wars and the war in Vietnam, I wanted it to end. I wanted racism to end. I wanted poverty to end. And like Joni, I wanted to save paradise. But life teaches us that experience isn't just, the good, the bad, the joy, the sorrow. There's so much nuance and complexity in the tapestry of our lives. And one of these dimensions is grief that I wanted to bring, and that I asked Jean, who read that poem so beautifully, wow, to speak about. And in this culture, we put grief in the unwelcome category, so we try to silo it away. We're trained to look away from grief and any difficulty or anything that makes us less than happy or comfortable. And when we experience loss or pain or hurt, grief, we can develop this habit, aided and abetted by our culture, of denying our grief, of pushing it away, of directing the energy outward in anger or blame, or turning it inward in shame or feelings of not being enough. In my case, helped along by the Catholic teachings of original sin. Just so you know, you come in with a black mark on your soul and it's there for the rest of your life, Where do you go from there? And without awareness, these survival strategies can harden into habits that get locked away and sometimes erupt in violence. You know, that adage, hurt people hurt people. My own losses and griefs have taught me the powerful energy of grief and its potential to contribute to full maturation and wholeness if engaged and not pushed away. And because change is inevitable, life teaches us that life and love and loss and love are inextricably intertwined. When we push down our grief, we push down our love. The Sikh activist and teacher Valerie Carr says, grief is the price we pay for love. The Black community in the United States, especially the Black church, has modeled how to sing through grief and together created a powerful container for collective holding and healing. And many of our church songs here flow from that tradition. Grief is too big to hold alone. Indigenous cultures around the world know this, the power of ritual to process grief and the centrality of doing it in community to lead toward healing. The church in Ocean Park has a grief group founded and led by Donna Brown from her own terrible grief. And that provides a welcoming space for us to name our grief out loud and to be held in a loving community when we do it. And Bonnie, I hope you don't mind me mentioning, I'm actually quoting you here, but one time in church a long time ago, I remember you expressing your grief about a tree that was being chopped down in your neighborhood, a beloved tree, and how you could feel the tree screaming inside you. Yeah. And you named it and expressed it in ways that others maybe feel, but don't feel like they can say that out loud in community, and I really appreciated that. And wars, by the way, are always both humanitarian and environmental catastrophes. And in this age when we're reaping the havoc wreaked by the human impact on the climate and ecological chaos and loss, we're culturally trained to look away, deny it, minimize it, or live as though that is a future that doesn't concern us, or even to be overly optimistic that there'll be some technological fix that's going to get us out of this pickle. Or understandably, to be just too overwhelmed trying to make a living, trying to raise a family, trying to tend to elders to give it much thought, or to push the thoughts into some back corner of the closet for airing some other time. I've been part of a community of Buddhist meditation teachers referenced in the introduction who trained together 20 years ago, and we've stayed together with every year and a half having retreats, and since COVID, online retreats, which are actually more realistic as many of us are aging. But some of us have continued to meet since almost 2 years now to face this crisis with eyes wide open and to support our communities as we move into an era of ever more uncertainty and vulnerability, and to develop rituals that we share with our communities. There's a core group of 5 of us that are the planning conveners for this group, and one of us is Indigenous, and she's currently training with a spiritual leader in her community, and she brings so much wisdom and experience with ceremony from her Pueblo culture. Many who see the impending and unfolding disastrous legacy of fossil fuel and overconsumption are rightly called to activism to protect the planet, and myself included. But we also have seen the importance of not skipping over the love and the grief that is the good fuel for these efforts. I've drawn on my own many personal losses as compost for turning toward the grief of the climate crisis, ecological degradation, and the uneven impact, as always, of those with less power. We also draw from the grief work of psychologist and communal grief leader Francis Weller. He has an incredible book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow about this. And the fabulous model of Joanna Macy's work, whose Chris read a quote that I gave him from her at the beginning. Joanna Macy is a Buddhist systems thinker, teacher, so much more. Briefly, she names her work the work that reconnects, and she talks about this spiral of 4 components that you can be activated at any point. It's not just linear, but these are the 4 parts of it. And the first is gratitude, which is about connecting so deeply with our love for this world. I'm looking out right now at Audrey, and you're going to be in upstate New York this week, which makes me so happy. So much beauty, so incredible. Connecting with our love for the earth and all its creatures and crevices and oceans and skies. We need to continually refresh this so we can use it as a resource for the challenges and opportunities these unique times hold. The second part of the spiral is grief, honoring our pain for the world. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist teacher, said, "What we most need is to hear within the sound of the earth crying," like Bonnie did. We're encouraged to develop communal rituals and practices where this grief can be expressed, witnessed by others, fully felt. Francis Weller says, in a very real way, grief ripens us, pulls up from the depths of our souls what is most authentic in our beings. In truth, without some familiarity with sorrow, we do not mature as men and women. It is the broken heart, the heart that knows sorrow, that is also capable of genuine love. And I can remember from years ago a quote from Joanna Macy, the heart that breaks open contains the entire universe. The third piece of the spiral is seeing with new/ancient eyes, and it comes from deeply engaging with love and loss. It leads to a felt connection that opens us up to the profound interconnectedness of life and the living planet we are part of. We are, as Thich Nhat Hanh says in his teachings. New, ancient, because the vision of the world we are opening to is a world that includes a profound understanding of the web of interdependence and interconnection and with all the living world, which is foundational to indigenous and ancient wisdom traditions already. What we're adding here is the science piece as well. The theologian turned geologian, Thomas Berry, with whom Chris, that's how he preferred to be referred, with whom Chris studied in grad school. We had the great good fortune to know Thomas very personally. He said, the universe, by definition, is a single, gorgeous, celebratory event. This is still Thomas, our relationship with the earth involves something more than pragmatic use, academic understanding, or aesthetic appreciation. A truly human intimacy with the earth and with the entire natural world is needed. Our children should be properly introduced to the world in which they live. So inspired by Robin Wall Kimmerer, when I read her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, so many years ago now, I developed this ritual of going out to my garden every morning to make an offering, and my offering is a little splash of chai tea, which Chris makes every day, So it's something precious to me. It has to be something that means something to you, to give up even a drop of that. And I just stand there and really feel into the garden, feel my feet on the earth, feel, by then, usually Chris has plugged in the fountain, I can hear the water and sense that in my body, and the air breathing in, breathing with the trees and the other plants, and the fire, the sun coming up, or seeing it just in this burst of life all around me. Remembering that we are kin, that we belong to each other. Mother Teresa says, if we have no peace, it's because we've forgotten we belong to each other. We understand how ultimately suicidal a growth-driven industrial economy and the hierarchies of domination societies are. We see this played out in the news every day, if not in our own lives. We see the injury and exploitation of people in a power over society that creates scarcity for those with the least amount of power and abundance for those with the most. Notice the zoning wars in LA, for example. Joanna Macy says, seeing with new ancient eyes leads to what she calls the great turning. And there is a podcast called that. I think you can just find it on your podcast, The Great Turning, and you'll hear her in conversation with a young activist who's trained with her. The Great Turning, the shift from an industrial growth society to a life-sustaining one. And to make this shift, we need to cultivate this capacity to hold the world the way it is without losing sight of the way it could be. And that this is, I think, at the heart of the Church in Ocean Park's mission. A society where power is understood to be mutual and synergistic. An economy that does not degrade or alter the balance of natural systems. This is from Joanna. Sufficiency for all is the goal, not the profit for a few. Feedback is essential for assessing true costs and harms to people and planet. Our genuine self-interest as human beings includes that of other beings and the living earth. We're not separate. And then the fourth one is going forth, the fourth aspect of that spiral. Howard Thurman, the author, philosopher, theologian, civil rights leader, famously said, "Don't ask for what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it." Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. I can barely not cry every time I read that. Joanna says, we move into the actions that call each of us according to our situation, gifts, and limitations. Working with others, we don't wait for a blueprint or a fail-proof scheme, for each step will be our teacher. And even when we don't succeed in a given venture, we can be grateful for the chance we took and the lessons we learned. And this is a direct quote from her. We can sense how intimately and completely we are related to all that is. It becomes clear how social justice and environmental justice are intertwined. We can taste our own power to change and feel the texture of our living connections with past and future generations and with our sibling species. And I'm going to let a poet have the last word here. I have no idea how long I've talked. I hope it's not too long. This is from the Indigenous poet Joy Harjo. It's called Remember. Remember the sky you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away to night. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them. Listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember, you are all people, and all people are you. Remember, you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember, all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember, language comes from this. Remember, the dance language is that life is. Remember. So thank you for your kind attention. And we go into silence now? Oh, we're going to go right to that. Okay, thank you. And Louise, thank you for learning the song I asked her to sing.
It was wonderful to hear this song and learn it. It's called The River by Coco Love Alcorn, a Canadian singer, folk singer. She has a lot of albums. The river is a healer. The river is a sage. The river knows no end, and the river feels no age. The river is a leader every single day. It's living in the moment, and it always finds a way. Water, heal my body. Water, heal my soul. When I go down to the water by the water makes me whole. Okay, I'm going to teach you that, why the water, I feel whole. That's what I was supposed to say. The water, heal my body. Water, water, heal my soul. When I go down to the water by the water, I feel whole. The river calls me over. It's calling out my name. In the day and in the nighttime, I hear that river all the same. It's calling me over, calling out my pain. On the river gathers tears, just like a river gathers rain. So water, heal my body. Water, heal my soul. When I go down to the water by the water, I feel whole. Again, water, heal my body. Water, heal my soul. When I go down to the water by the water, I feel whole. The river is a traveler, always on the go. A river never worries. It's fast or it's if it's slow. River, take me where I need to go. Oh, and I will just relax and let the water flow. Water, heal my body. Water, heal my soul. When I go down to the water, by the water I feel whole. Water, heal my body. Water, by the water I feel whole. By the water I feel whole. By the water I feel whole. Thank you. And thank you for introducing me more to Coco Love Alcorn.
Okay, so we come now to time for sharing. As the message was being given, I sort of remembered my wife, Maureen, called me yesterday, and she was describing some grief she had, struggle with grief because one of her nephews was in trouble, difficulty, lost his home, was homeless, and so on. And she was sharing that moment of grief with me. And then she said to me, you know, I got a text from Claudia Landis. And I say, who? I got a text from Claudia Landis. She hadn't heard from her for years. And Claudia, she said the text she got from Claudia sort of revived and gave her such reassurance and hope that, you know, and that's what she was describing to me. So I remember that while you were speaking. And it just goes to show how, you know, just a note, and sometimes it is the very sick who helps those who are, you know, so it's a strange, it's very strange. Anyhow, sharing time.
Well, I really loved what you said, Maureen, about loving the world in spite of all the things that happen, all the foolishness that people do. I don't know what your words were, but anyway, that's what my words are. And it really brought to mind the garden outside. And we all pass the garden when we come in here, but I don't know if you know what a miracle that garden is. So I've been talking to Jane, who has volunteered in our garden and made it the miracle that it is. And so I spent some time this week looking up the things that she was telling me about. There's something called the soil food web. It's the web of creatures that are under the ground, under our feet. Every time we walk on, you know, not cement, but on earth or grass or in a garden. And so I just want to tell you really briefly, because I know we don't have a lot of time. So I don't know if you remember, but Jane cut down all of the plants in the garden and she left them on top of the soil. And if you look at it today, when you leave, there are plants aplenty, and they came from those dead plants that she cut down. All the seeds went into the soil, and all the nutrients from the leaves that rotted went into the soil to give nutrition to the new plants, and that's what you're going to see when you walk outside. But what's helping all that happen is this amazing web of creatures. And some people call it the soil FBI. The fungi, the bacteria, and the invertebrates. And the invertebrates are all the beetles and spiders and the roly-polies. And there are worms. The worms are the ones that make the air flow through the soil. And so that's what I was thinking about when you were talking today, because it really has, in the last week that I've been doing this, diverted my attention from the craziness, because I have had a lot of grief about the craziness.
Thank you. I just want to say quickly, when 2 weeks ago now, I think, we had to take out a tree that had died in our yard, and it's a toyon, is a native tree that's been there probably 70 years, but it was completely dead and it was starting to lean over, and it was excruciating. to watch it go. I thought of you, Bonnie, actually, in that moment. And I was telling this to my friend Karen, who's the indigenous person that I work closely with, and Karen said, I just talked about the grief for the loss of the tree, and she said, pray for the roots under the soil. They're very confused right now. So again, just like what's out of sight, that we can bring in.
I just want to thank you because listening to you this morning has helped me deal with a lot of the grief I've been feeling. So I'm really grateful. Thank you so much.
Joseph, thank you for telling me that about Maureen and Claudia, because I do have sort of living with this kind of ongoing grief with Claudia and her situation and these kind of random things that she has very little short-term memory, but she does have some long-term memory, and sometimes those go back to a better place for her. So thank you for that. And the conversation about the garden and that sort of thing, I just looked this up because if you're interested, there's an opinion writer, the Washington Post, and Dana Milbank, who wrote an article, "To Save the Birds, I'm Killing My Farm." But it's really interesting because I hadn't realized he had these open fields that were populated with hay, and somebody would come and cut it, and the hay is for other things. But he has gone back to kind of rewilding the outdoor, that area. And it's interesting because that cycle of grassland to woodland that occurred in this country kind of pre-settlement, that was very natural. Things burned, they came back. But it's fascinating when he does that, and it's part of the underground and the soil, the number of species of plants and animals that return, that you don't think about. It isn't the 5 birds you like to look at. It is a far more complex web of plants and life and animals as well. That's really interesting. And it's kind of it's just, I enjoyed reading it because it's like one little person's thing they were doing, and it gave me a little bit of joy.
Thank you. And just in response to that, too, there was this little seedling under the toyon. And we knew it wasn't a toyon, but I couldn't see it closely enough when the tree was still up. And we thought of asking the gardeners who were taking the tree out to save it, but I thought it's just too much to ask them. It's this big tree. But they did it anyway. They did it on their own. They saved it. And the consensus with them and another gardener and my app is that it's likely a coast live oak, which we have tried repeatedly to grow in our backyard, and it's never taken. And there are some coast live oaks a few blocks over, so a squirrel or a bird, somebody delivered us. Yeah.
Within this grieving process, I can only imagine that you're mourning something, but I'm wondering specifically also, within that mourning, is there a release of stress and an opening up of greater possibilities to where we can be strengthened within that? I'm anticipating there is, but I'm still not clear as to how, if at all, it is possible with which that can be actually realized. Because I see so much cause for people to grieve, I have to wonder, okay, how they want us to come back out on the other side of this.
Yeah, and I obviously can't speak for anyone else. I mean, I can only speak for myself. And there's no grief Olympics, but, there are people with a lot more to grieve. So I just want to say that. But so one of the Buddhist practices I do is Tonglen, and in Tonglen, you breathe in your grief, and you breathe out the wish for it to, alleviate, but also that everyone else who's grieving also have a release of suffering. And there's something in that ritual and that practice. I mean, you don't just do it once, you do it over and over and over again. That has really helped me personally. And then it's just in Joanna's model there, when there's love, there's ingratitude, there's grief, there's seeing with new ancient eyes, which are exactly what this practice I just described points to, which is that we're all interconnected. So my grief is your grief. I wrote a poem about my mom once, actually about my mom dying, and just like that was the big realization for me, that her grief was my grief, that there wasn't any difference. And then there's, Howard Thurman's invitation. He can't tell you what to do, each of us has to figure out our path forward. There's no formula for that. But, sorry.
Okay. Jean, can you read the first line of that poem? I was so struck by it. It just really hit me. Well,
what if instead of grief,
the next line.
We call it pollination.
We call it pollination. There's something about that so speaks to me, and it's so healing. Many of you know, grief has always been almost like a center identity for me. I've just now in the last few months really kind of unveiled how it has expressed itself in so many different ways in my life that I was completely unaware of. I felt I was so angry as a young person, and I never understood why. Well, duh, now. And perfectionism, that I can't make a mistake, and somebody's going to discover, and I never thought of that as part of my grief, but it is. And then talking about nature, I remember as an adolescent, I remember saying, I hate nature. I did. I hate trees, I hate birds, I hate nature. And I didn't make the connection then, but I so make it now. Now, but it's the uncovering of all those different ways that we grieve has really been amazing for me and freeing for me. Even the river song, that's me. I love water's healing to me. So I just so appreciate you opening that up and really exploring all the ways that grief manifests itself in our lives. And, I've always wondered, why do I feel such empathy for other people? I do, and it's like, where did that come from? Well, the grief. So thank you so very much. It just really moved. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maureen. It's very thought-provoking, the whole thing to me, because I'm really quite a doer of a person anymore. And everything is like, well, what's next? And I have impatience, and I'm just always doing. And this is so weird that I do not cry anymore. And I used to cry a lot. I was trained in letting out grief with tears. And I don't cry anymore. I mean, I cried at the end of the movie Lion, that Indian boy that got lost on the train and didn't find his family for 25 years or whatever. Oh my God. But I don't cry anymore, and it bothers me. It's like, am I bottled up, or is there a river of grief flowing underneath? I do say I have a lot of joy in my life with singing, but if I didn't have those song circles, I worry, like aging, where are those song circles going to come from? I won't have them, And I think about aging and, really old age. I'm already, old in a way. But, and I feel nature deprived. Listening to you, you just embody love of the earth, and I feel kind of out of touch, and I don't have a practice. So you're raising my awareness to maybe new needs that I have. I stopped hiking because my legs hurt too much. And so I'm not going out in nature, but you revive for me that glorious feeling of being part of the world and in touch with a deeper part of myself. So thank you.
And also thank you for the song, because during the pandemic, Louise turned me on to Maggie Wheeler's song fests or whatever online, and that's where I found Coco Love Alcorn, and that's eventually where I found that song. So it came back to you.
Thank you very much, Maureen. There's so much, this has been so rich, and there's so much that people have shared that I don't want to repeat what other people have said, just because it takes too long. But I knew I had to be inside today. I knew I actually had a responsibility to help with child care, but I also knew that I had to take care of myself, and I felt very conflicted about that. So you saw I came back inside because, as most of you know, on October 7th of last year, Fred and I poured Getacheo's ashes into the Pacific. And it's really clear to me that to be grieving in the midst of a genocide that is on social media that is impossible to turn away from, that there are 14 pages in the report of identified bodies in Gaza. There are 14 pages of children under the age of 1. Not to mention all the other hundreds of pages of older people. It's overwhelming. And self-care in the midst of overwhelming grief, I think, is a responsibility for all of us. To not look away, but to experience the grief that we are all one, that is our human connection. But to not be paralyzed, sunk into, not to be sunk into that grief, but to be able to have it be part of a broader practice. And I struggle with that. One of the things I know, or at least I've read, I don't really know it for sure, but I think it's true, is that trees in a forest communicate underground through their roots. I think that's true. This is not my area of expertise, but I'm pretty sure that is true. And it is important to me to know that I am part of a forest of people whose roots, my roots connect to your roots underground. If we don't see each other, we're still connected, and that I am supported by that connection. And it ain't easy to remember all that all the time, but I know it to be true. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone on Zoom?
All right, can you hear me now? I just wanted to share that the Santa Monica Conservancy has a headquarters not far from the church, across from the library, and it's a shotgun house, they call it, and that's their headquarters. And around it, they have a very small garden, and that garden is being planted with the kinds of plants that were here in Santa Monica, in this area, before the white people came. It's from when tribes were living here, and they're doing the research and then trying to plant the kinds of plants that that were here naturally, or were planted and used by the people from the tribes who lived here long ago. I just wanted to share that with the people who are talking about the church garden, because it might be an interesting thing to go over and see that garden and see what's growing there. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else from Zoom?
Okay. So it's when we talk about renewal in the natural environment and stuff, it works in wondrous ways, kind of on its own. The physical environment doesn't always do that. It's in a kind of constant state of falling apart. And, we've done a lot to fix the ceiling and bring back the church. But I noticed something this morning when I came in, because I got here late. The parking lot was full, pretty much, which is great. That's really positive. But because the parking lot hasn't been resurfaced in a long time, people are parking kind of all higgity-piggity all over the place, whatever word you want to use. And we're kind of in a tough place. We can't paint the lines, really, until we have some money to do it. So, but it's one of those things that when more people come, it's a bigger issue, which is good. So just think about that when the bucket and basket goes around. Anything you can do is really helpful. So thank you.
The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. Aye, 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 aye. Oh, aye, oh, aye, oh, aye, oh. Aye, 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 oh, aye, oh. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. Earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. Aye, 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 oh, aye, oh, aye, oh, aye, oh. Aye, 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 oh, aye, oh, aye, oh, aye, oh. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return. The earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, 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 return. Earth, the water, the fire, the air, return, return, return. The earth, bread and will share from their heart. Any community member can do this. So today it is Bob sharing from his heart, and he brought us bread. Welcome, Bob. Give him a hand.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to say a little something that really is not part of my bread presentation, but I sort of owe an explanation to Maureen, but the rest of you can overhear it. My brother Bill had sent me a video of the song that was projected there, and I thought it was a great Church in Ocean Park song, and it would fit with this morning. There are lines like, sing to everything because everything is you. But I was watching the video last night, or trying to, and it wouldn't play. I got a message that says, this is not available due to some union rule. So called Bill, and we had to search around, and we found another version of the same group singing the same song. But the words were much less clear in this one. So I apologize for that, but we did our best. Okay. Now, well, yes, there is so much to grieve about, and it's so present to us these days, especially as you were so eloquently saying, Linda. But then one question that arises is, what is to be done? What can we do as individuals? Also, what approaches to the troubles of the world can we support, even if we're not, leading the way? And these approaches, I guess, tend to fall under, to oversimplify, 3 categories. Well, one is sort of a non-approach of just letting things happen. A second way is nonviolent struggle, which is different. It's not just nonviolence, which is sort of like the first way, but nonviolent struggle is action. And a third way would be violent struggle of some kind, armed struggle, which has often been employed in overthrowing colonial powers and so forth. I'm not going to attempt to, totally answer the question of which are preferable in my 2 or 3 minutes I have left, but I do. I've been reading a book that called Waging Nonviolent Struggle. The author was introduced to me by Hurley Jim. He told me about him. And from this book, I would like to share just something that might be one valuable part of a discussion on this general question of violence versus nonviolence. It seems to me, for instance, in reference to Palestine now, various things are happening. Nonviolent struggle is happening, like on college campuses and so forth, and there's also some violent struggle happening. I wonder, is there some nonviolent approach that could bring not just peace, but justice to that area. And the same question comes up in many different parts of the world where there's tremendous injustice. Gene Sharp, overall, is an advocate of nonviolence. He's done a great deal of study, and in fact, this book includes studies of 23 different major nonviolent campaigns in different parts of the world during the 20th century. His overall conclusion is that, and he studied this for 50 years. He died in 2018 at the age of 90. But his overall conclusion was that, on the whole, nonviolence campaigns are more productive. They cause less harm, and they have results that are more favorable. But he doesn't have a recipe and a guarantee, if you do this, you'll get such and such a result. The world is not that simple. And the only thing I want to add to the conversation at this point would be, I would not like to see, on the whole, I think most of us hope more can be done nonviolently, and I wouldn't want to see the potential for nonviolent campaigns to be underestimated because of misperceptions, myths, misunderstandings of nonviolence. And he enumerates 11 common misunderstandings, but I'm not going to read all of them. But I found these quite interesting. I'll read 7 of the 11. And by the way, he lists 198 different types of nonviolent struggle and invites us to think of more. But it's not Mickey Mouse list, though. I mean, it's very well thought out sort of classification of possible nonviolent methods. Okay, here's one misconception. I'll just read what he says. Nonviolent action has nothing to do with passivity, submissiveness, or cowardice. Just as in violent action, these must first be rejected and overcome before the struggle can proceed. So either violent action or nonviolent action takes a lot of courage and resolve and discipline and so forth. 3, I'm skipping 2. Nonviolent action is not to be equated with verbal persuasion or purely psychological influences. Nonviolent action is a technique of struggle involving the use of psychological, social, economic, and political power in the matching of forces in conflict. In other words, it's not just a matter of talking earnestly to those in power and trying to persuade them to see things your way. He says that works, maybe about 1% of the time at best. So nonviolence is not just about persuading the unjust power to stop being unjust. Instead, as he sees it, it's a matter of orchestrating power of various other kinds to, change the situation, to change the power situation. So speaking truth to power, it's not really what he's talking about. I mean, you could do that, but if you're trying to persuade the power, that's, let other people hear what you say and then carry through with your your program. He says, nonviolent action does not depend on the assumption that people are inherently good. The potentialities of people for both good and evil are recognized, including the extremes of cruelty and inhumanity. Certainly seeing a lot of those in play these days. 5, in order to use nonviolent action effectively, people do not have to be pacifists or saints. He mentions that probably the most famous nonviolent leaders are people like Gandhi, Martin Luther King, even James Lawson, who lived so close to us. He says those are atypical, that of the many, many different campaigns he studied, most of them have not been led by spiritual leaders, and most participants have not necessarily believed in nonviolence as their overall philosophy of life, but rather they have adopted nonviolence as the most promising tool, yeah, exactly, to deal with whatever they're dealing with. Which is not to say they take nonviolence lightly, because he says it does, if you're going to do it, it has to be done really with a great deal of discipline. Okay. But you don't have to believe, say, that violence is always wrong in every case to participate in the kind of campaigns he's talking about, although you can have that belief. Okay, getting close. Nonviolent action is at least as, oh no, I'll leave that one out. In nonviolent action, there's no assumption that the opponents will refrain from using violence against nonviolent resistors. In fact, the technique is capable of operating against violence. Next, nonviolent action is not limited to domestic conflicts. It can be used against powerful governments, foreign occupiers, despotic regimes, tyrannical governments, empires, ruthless dictatorships, and totalitarian systems. Okay. Doesn't have to just be local. And finally, one of the many widely believed myths about conflict, I found this very interesting, is that violence works quickly and nonviolent struggle takes a long time to bring results. So someone might say, we need armed struggle because, the injustice is crying out for redress, so we have to do something quickly. But he says this is not true. Some wars and other violent struggles have been fought for many years. And conversely, in some cases, big changes have been brought about rather quickly through such things as general strikes. Governments have been brought down by mass protests and strikes and boycotts. I mean, that's not always the case. That may also take a very long time. But it's not as if there's a ratio between violence brings quick, good results and nonviolence takes a long time. That can go in any different direction. Okay, well, those are some things to think about. And that's the best I can do, is just leave you to think more about them.
We're going to join in a circle now. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I feel your heartbeat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I feel your heartbeat. Way, oh, way, oh, way, oh, way. Way, oh, way, oh, way, oh. Way, oh, way, oh, way, oh, way. Way, oh, way, oh, way, oh. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I feel your heartbeat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I feel your heartbeat. Way, oh, way, oh, way. Way, oh, way, oh, way, oh. Way, oh, way, oh, way, oh, way. Way, oh, way, oh, way, oh.
Okay, so we give thanks for our worship today. We went a little long, but we know that this topic, we have to give people chance and time to express and to share, especially when it comes to the topic that we discussed today. So we are very thankful for the presentation and for our sharing, both on Zoom and here. So we are going to give thanks as we lift our hands up. We go on mute, those on Zoom, and we lift our hands up, and after 3, we say,
We say carry on after we count of 3. Carry.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, carry on.